you did like this. You were going to say that it's so bad. I'm playing the game.
Follow me.
Oh yeah, I can play the demo.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, no, we're filling you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thanks very much for coming. So we recently released this, Oddword New and Tasty. It's a full remake from the ground up of the original Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey, which was on the original PlayStation and is now on PlayStation 4. My name is Matt Glanville. I am the game designer of Just Add Water. So it's my job to think about and implement all of the gameplay elements and a little bit of story and that kind of thing. I'm going to be talking today about some of the gameplay changes that we made for Oddword New and Tasty and our main reasons behind those changes. So this is the original Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, which is now 17 years old. That was on the PlayStation 1, and this is New and Tasty. So it's essentially the same story and the same characters, the same level of progression, but we just revamped and redid it for modern consoles. So can I just get a quick show of hands? How many people here played the original game? Oh, awesome. Okay, and how many have played New and Tasty so far? Okay, cool. Well, you can play it here today. We've got it on PS4 and PC, the first ever PC build. For those of you who aren't familiar with either of them, it's essentially the story of Abe, who is a Madokan. He is a floor cleaner in a meat processing factory, and he one day discovers that him and all the fellow workers are going to be turned into tasty meat snacks by their employers. So he busts out of there and you rescue all your buttons. So where do we start when you're remaking a game that's as popular as Abe's Odyssey? There's no easy feat. Why do we do a remake at all? It's obviously a very popular game, going for it back in the day. Do we want to change anything at all? When I started it, Just Add Water, which was last June, we were headed more down the route of a one-to-one remake, and it would play exactly the same, the levels would be exactly the same, it would just get a fresh lick of paint, as it were. Over the following year, so up till now, up till the release, it actually deviated a lot more from that, and it's now something entirely new that stands on its own, I think. So we have to ask the questions, what do we want to change? Change anything at all? How's that? Do we want to change anything at all? What do we want to keep? Well, we know we had a great story, we had a great script, we had a great sense of humour to the game, really memorable characters which everyone still remembers to this day. We had a lot of people just recognising Abe already. And we've got some really strong kind of interesting relationships between gameplay characters, all the different creatures and the way they interact with one another is really solid. So we definitely want to keep all that stuff. But we know that the original game is very difficult and some of the elements haven't aged too well, so we probably want to give that a fresh lick of paint. And personally, I really wasn't fond of the bats. Does anyone remember the bats in the original game? Like, they just drove me nuts, so we wanted to kind of get rid of them if we could. So the most obvious change is the camera. The original game had these static cameras, and you could walk around on the screen, but the background just stayed the same. If you walk off the edge of the screen, it flips to the next one, and you've got these kind of discrete rooms. And that was mainly down to a hardware limitation of the PlayStation 1. So to get the kind of fidelity that the artists wanted, you just couldn't have a moving camera. those limitations no longer apply, of course. We've got much more powerful hardware these days. So now we've added motion to the camera, and it follows Abe around as we move it back and forth, and it's just smoothly scrolling. By the way, I recently discovered that you can put animated GIFs in presentations, and it's a real game changer. So, making this change, we can show off a lot more emotion in the character's faces. You know, we can angle and zoom and do all these crazy things and make it much more vibrant and feel much more alive. But it's not without knock-ons. So the original game, a lot of the gameplay is based around the fact that something is either on screen or it's not. So we have these objects called chant suppressors, which when you're using your chant ability, they would zap you. And they would basically work if they were on screen. And if you walk onto the next screen, then they're no longer active. Well, now the camera can move and it can zoom out, and suddenly you can see a lot more than you could before. Now you can see a chant suppressor, so does that mean now it's suddenly active again? Now its range is increasing? So we had to move everything over to much more of a kind of area of effect-based system. So everything's got these kind of fixed ranges, and if you're inside the range, then it can zap you. But now we have the question, how do you know if you're in range or not? Obviously it's easy before, if it's on screen you're in range, and if you're off screen, it's not. So we put things like lights on there, and the lights turn on and off depending on whether you're in range. So we had to make all these kind of tweaks to give feedback to the players of how the new gameplay systems worked. There was another interesting set of behaviour that I noticed when we had the original fixed camera system, and that was basically how if you're walking up to if you're running across the screen, you know that you've got this invisible boundary, and across that boundary there might be danger. So if you're running along, you can suddenly stop and then like creep over. It's like, okay, there's something there, I'm going to run back again. But when the camera's constantly moving, you don't have that warning. So we had to make a few changes there to give players a bit more heads up of, you should probably start being careful now. It turns out also that adding 3D perspective to what are essentially 2D gameplay elements changes the way they read visually. So one of those areas that we had problems with was the shadow zones. In the original game you had these dark areas, and as long as you were standing in them and being quiet, then enemies wouldn't see you. But now you can tilt the camera, and we have these problems like this. So technically Abe is inside a shadow zone. We've got these kind of invisible boxes that we draw out in the levels. But because the camera's tilted, he's clearly visible, and it really kind of breaks the illusion that he's hidden. So we had to address that somehow and really and sell the idea to the player and make it obvious when you're hidden and when you're not. So the solution we came up with was these steam zones, they're kind of underfloor vents with steam rising up out of them. Now it's really clear, Abe's standing in the steam, he's hidden. You can see him a little bit still because you're a player and you need to see where he is, but that's okay, we can get away with that. And we also added a couple of details on the front just to really sell, like, stand right here, now you're safe. Another element that was affected by the 3D perspective is the motion sensors. So in the original game here, there are these just kind of beams of light, lasers almost, that swipe back and forth across the level. And if you're moving when they touch you, then you set off an alarm and you're probably going to die. Now, when we put that into 3D, it was just immediately obvious that that wasn't going to work, because you can't just have light stop for no reason like that. It looked okay in 2D, they kind of got away with it, but we had to come up with something a bit more detailed. So we got these kind of airport security scanner kind of things, and these slide back and forth on the rails. Gameplay-wise, they're almost identical. There's one small compromise we had to make, so they don't overlap anymore, but we're still able to maintain the same level of challenge, which we thought was the most important thing we should be focusing on there. So, can I just get another quick show of hands? So who earlier put a hand up to say they played the original Abe's Odyssey? Okay, so keep your hands up for me for just a moment. Everyone just have a quick look around and see how many people have got their hands up. Alright, now keep your hand up if you completed the original game. Yeah, there's quite a few hands went down there. So So it was a really difficult game, and we were fully aware of that when we started remaking it, and we thought that was something we really had to address because the original developers got a lot of feedback saying, you know, we love AIM, we love the story, we love the world, we love the atmosphere, but we just can't get past the first level. It's really hard. There were no options for difficulty or anything like that. So we narrowed that down to a few different points of why we thought it was so difficult and so hard for people to make progress. The main one being, if you make one mistake in Abe's Odyssey, you're dead. You have no health, you have no second chances, and quite a lot of the time you could run into danger, and that's it. So we implemented a whole health system. And so now you can take a couple of extra hits, and if you're quick, you can turn around, you can get out of the danger, and you can live to tell the tale. Maybe you run into some more danger, live to tell the tale from that, and you've got these crazy long sequences going on where you're just ping-ponging between hazards and just scrambling through, and it becomes much more exciting and less like, oh, well, how was I going to know that was there? So another issue we had with the original game is that the checkpoints were few and far between, and every time you died, which was quite often because you'd only take one hit, you had to replay these huge long sections again, and you had no way of saving, so it was quite harsh in that respect. So one of the first things we did was just put in loads more checkpoints and make it much more forgiving in that respect, and just take the edge off it. But we didn't stop there, we put in a whole quick save feature, so now anytime you just tap the touchpad on the PlayStation 4 and it just makes a save. Now I come from playing a lot of PC games from back when the original Abe's Odyssey came out, so I was really used to just hammering quick save every time I got past something that was hard. So that takes the edge off it a lot. And on a broader note, we found that a lot of the challenges and the puzzles really only had one way of getting through them. So either you did it or you didn't, and you died quite often if you didn't do it. So we really wanted to kind of not punish players for not getting the solution, but really expand the number of options they had and let them use their own creativity and find their own play style, and just kind of work it out themselves, and then be able to compare stories with other people and say, oh, how did you do this bit? Oh, I did that. Oh, that's strange because I didn't know you could do that. So the controls is obviously something we had to take a look at. The original PlayStation controller didn't even have analog sticks, so we're going back quite a way now. So we wanted to modernise that, and we find, a lot of games these days tend to have these new conventions of the way you lay out your buttons. Jump is usually on the bottom button, things like that. So we applied a lot of those modern conventions to the controls. We spent a lot of time tuning those. We wanted to simplify it wherever we could as well, because in the original game, a lot of the time you had to hold two buttons at once, and it just became like you're doing Twister with your hands, and it's just more things to remember just to do one simple action. So wherever we could, we just stripped out those extra button combos. An example of that is the run button. So we put run just on the analog stick, and you tilt it a little way and you walk, and you tilt it all the way and you run now. As it turns out, some people weren't too keen on that change, and they told us they wanted to have that fine degree of control over running. So after we released, we actually added a patch where now you have the option of having a button to run. So thankfully, living in a kind of always connected online world that we live in now, we can make that change and we can respond to feedback really quickly. So that's awesome. So we reached a stage quite late in the development where our programmers are already busy, they're putting in the last few features, they're fixing bugs, they're making it work on the PlayStation 4. And all we had is talk of, how can we give just that extra level of polish and that extra kind of oomph to the game? And our solution was to add more everything. First thing we looked at was more predators. So the paramites at the bottom here, these nasty creatures that run around and attack Abe at almost any chance they get. And normally where we had 2 or 3 on the PlayStation 1 because of hardware limitations, now we can just make like a dozen of them chasing after you and just maximize that sense of threat. And it's still the case of, if you get caught, you're probably going to die, but now there's more of them chasing you. It just feels more exciting and dramatic. We have more pals, so your Madokan friends that you had to rescue. The original game had 99 of those that you had to find and save. We tripled that number and there's now 299. So our main reason behind that was, it was mainly like a sense of satisfaction. So if you rescue one guy, you get jumping through the portal and you get this kind of bing, it's quite satisfying. If you get 2, it's like bing bing, and cool, that's quite cool. But if you get 10 at a time, it just goes nuts, and you've got all these guys jumping through one after the other, and it just feels great. So it's mainly an aesthetic choice, just to kind of ramp up what's there. And for the most part, we just put a few extra Medokins in existing areas, but in a few other places we hid them in some new secret areas, so I'm not going to tell you anything about that. More riding, we had a beast called Elam, who was like this 2-legged kind of steed that you could ride on. We kind of cranked up his speed, so he's now running along much faster than he did before, and we found that was really fun. So the series creator, Lord Lanning, suggested that we added 4 new levels to make use of that, and we all looked at him like he was mad. But then we did it anyway, and actually it turned out great, so it was probably for the best. More ruckus. Later on in the game you get the power of Schweikel, which is a Medokan god, and it lets you just go nuts with power, and you can zap everything that's on screen. But the problem we found with that in the original game is you had to go through all these steps to get the power, and then once you had it, you used it once, and then you can't use it anymore. So we just made that a little bit more accessible to get, because for narrative reasons, we want you to feel like when you come back at the end of the game, you're really just charging through, and you're gained all this like immense power. So we just kind of made it more available, and lets you kind of hammer at home and just take out all your enemies. More frying, so there's these electric gates, and if you walk into them you die. That's still the case, but in the original game you just kind of frazzled out and disappeared. Now in New and Tasty we've got these like crazy sparks that just go flying and the whole screen zaps, and we've almost got like a kind of Looney Tunes like ah! And I don't think I'm ever going to forget the look on the artists' faces when they have to look at people being electrocuted as reference material for that. And we got more farts. The farts are back. We'll still have more farts. We've got a few more variations on the audio. We did actually at one point discuss a trapped wind mechanic, whereby the longer you went without farting, the bigger the fart would be when you finally let rip. But we have to make the cut somewhere, so that got chopped. So we changed all these elements. We totally revamped the camera and everything that all the knock-on effects that came with. We added an entire health system, which by the way is optional, so you've basically got a hard difficulty mode, and so you can play the game like it was originally. It's still brutal. We expanded the capacity for multiple solutions, we added a quick save feature, we added more everything, and a bunch of other features which I just don't have time to talk about today. But as we're doing this, we've got this kind of underlying conflict between old and new. How much do we want to deviate from the blueprint that we've got? It was obviously very popular back in the day. And to an extent, as with any remake, your creativity is kind of restricted in some ways because you want to stay faithful to that. We later, as soon as we finished the game, we went on to work on a DLC chapter, and it turns out in that we were actually able to exercise our creativity a lot more. We were able to take a lot of the ideas that we had through development of New and Tasty that we felt weren't right for those original levels, and just put them in some new levels and just really go nuts. So what we came up with was Alf's Escape. So this is Alf here. He is another Medokan, and he was originally in Abe's Exodus, which was the sequel to the original Abe's Odyssey. So it's a whole new chapter, and as someone pointed out on Twitter, this is the first all-new Oddword content in 9 years, since Stranger's Wrath was released in 2005. So there's no pressure there, really. And this came very late, after release. Our programmers had already moved on to getting the game working on PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, fixing any remaining bugs we had. So we were already working with actually just a third of the development team, which was about 4 or 5 people, so we're a very small studio. and we had 1 month to make it in. So there was some kind of tight restrictions on development there. And maybe that's got something to do with why we decided to bring back the intense, brutal difficulty from the original game. So we had all these ways we had to basically be resourceful with what we had. And we did that for the most part through our level design. So in Alf's Escape, you progress all the way through the chapter, you find Alf, and it's then your job to get him out of Rupture Farms. So at that point, the level folds back on itself, and you come back through, but this time you've got Alf with you, and it just changes all the challenges. So now you're looking out for both Abe and Alf. So that way we get double the mileage out of our levels, and double the challenges for players to overcome. So I'm really impressed with how well the team did on Alf's Escape, but really it's not about what I think, it's about what you think. So I'd like to just show you a quick trailer of Alf's Escape. So that's all new content in there, but making use of what we had built for New and Tasty. So New and Tasty took 18 months approximately to develop, which is really quite an impressive amount of time, if I may say so myself. And I'm incredibly proud of what the team managed to pull off in that time, and we're really pleased with it. But ultimately, you lot are going to be the judges of that. So we'd like you all to come and play the game. We got over on the PlayStation 4 stand, we've got it running there. We've got the first ever public PC build. So come and have a go. We love talking to our fans, getting feedback, finding out what you all think. And we're very much an indie studio on an indie budget, so your support is absolutely hugely appreciated. Please come and check it out. You can get the game now on PlayStation 4, and it's coming soon to all these other consoles. And if you can support us on social media, that is very much appreciated as well. Thank you very much for coming, and I think I have a little bit of time for some questions, if anyone has any. Yes, hello. You got a microphone.
Is there going to be a Wii U version?
Yes, we do have a Wii U version planned, but I've missed it off that list, I'm afraid.
Do you think you're ever going to make an Abe's Exodus remake like this?
We hope to. I mean, so the original plan was that Abe's Odyssey would be a way to relaunch the Oddword brand after it's been quiet for a few years. And the goal was always, that this is entirely self-funded by Oddworld inhabitants. So this was a way of taking something we knew already worked and trying to rebuild those funds. So really it hinges on the success of New and Tasty. Lon Lanning, who's the creator of Oddworld, has talked about this a little bit already in some of his talks. Essentially, the more copies we sell, the more likely we are to do Abe's Exodus. But yeah, we really do want to do it. Hi.
Hi. I know that there was supposed to be quite a few sort of
ambitions for all those games still, and I know that they're still, mixing around in the back of his mind. I don't think we've announced anything officially of what's going to happen there, but yeah, I mean there was a whole quintology planned, and really got around to making 2 of those. So there's still a lot more to come, and besides that, there's talked about other games like Brutal Ballad of Fangus Plot and that kind of thing. So nothing officially, but hopefully, and again, it all hinges on the success of Doom Tasty. So please come and buy it, and you can get some more sequels.
Hi there.
Hi.
Basically, you've remade New and Tasty, and you consider making Exodus based on how profitable this is. Would you ever add to Abe's story beyond that? So, would you ever consider making new content that is beyond Exodus, just a completely new game?
Do you mean just featuring Abe?
Well, maybe with new characters, but even like furthering it, because there's more to the world, isn't there?
I think I couldn't really speak for Lorne's ambitions in that respect. Quite possibly. I know he's always churning out ideas. He actually came and spent a few months in the studio with us, and we hear a new idea every day. So who knows? Thanks.
I know what a lot of people like about the Oddword stuff is the actual world and how interesting it is. Is there any plans to do anything outside like video games, like other media?
Again, nothing planned that I know of, but I know there was a movie script in the works. I'm not sure how much of that is public knowledge. Probably not a lot based on how much you're shaking your head. But there was a few other things. There was also a movie called Citizen Siege, which was entirely non-Oddworld related, which was in development around the time of Stranger's Wrath, I think. Which I'm not too sure where that is now, but
Get Andy Serkis to play Abe,
that would be great. That would be an excellent choice. If Andy Serkis is watching, speak to us. We got any more questions?
Yeah.
Down the front. Hi.
Hello. Obviously, depending on how well this goes and everything, it's the remake of it. Is there any plans to bring out anything new with Abe and Oddworld or anything like that?
Again, possibly. I know that the main direction would be getting back to the quintology, so that would be, the top priority. But we've discussed ideas internally of some different directions we could take it in, but we don't really have any solid plans at this stage, unfortunately. But it would be awesome if we did. We actually talked about having a mini game jam in the studio and just using Abe and Elam and doing like an endless runner in like knocking something out in a week and just messing around with it internally. But we haven't got around to doing that yet. Any more?
Hi.
Hi.
Do you think we'll ever see much of it?
Maybe. So again, I don't know the specific plans for where the quintology is going, but if you look at Munch's Odyssey, it features Abe and Munch. So this is my own personal speculation. This is not official by any means, but I would imagine that as the quintology goes on, you would get characters stacking up. So you would get Abe and Munch in whatever the next one is, and then whoever's in that will be in the next one. Possibly. Don't take my word on that.
Is there any estimate on the release date for the other platforms?
We're not announcing a release date just yet. So, as I said, we're a really small studio. We're putting everything we've got into it. So, it's going to be out as soon as we possibly can. But we're not going to commit to a release date until we're sure that we can hit that and really deliver a quality product, because that's really what's important at the end of the day. But having said that, it's coming along really well. So hopefully very soon. Any more? Yes, on the front.
Is there going to be any jobs?
Any jobs? Stuart, he's right there. He's our boss.
Will there be any parody games
Any parody games?
of Abe and Alf? Like, just a book.
We'd like to. We were actually discussing in the car down, speaking to the surgeon simulator guys and having like a Medocan autopsy. So if they're listening, they should come and speak to us too. But again, like we don't have any plans for anything explicitly. Any others? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. Come and check out the game. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And thank you very much.